She walked into the divorce carrying a newborn, and the billionaire ex went pale as he sat beside his fiancée. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She walked into the divorce with a newborn strapped to her chest, and silence falling like glass. Julian Crestmont looked up, and every drop of color drained from his face. His fiancée didn't breathe. No one did. Camille didn't say a word at first. She just stared at the man who swore he couldn't have children. Then she looked down at the baby, and the baby looked back with his eyes. The room stopped pretending this was going to be a normal divorce. This wasn't paperwork. This wasn't closure. This was detonation. Julian pushed back from the table like the air had turned toxic. His voice cracked. "Who is that?" Camille's answer was quiet, final. "His name is Noah. Oh, and he's yours." The manila folder she placed on the table might as well have been a bomb. Inside it, the truth Julian spent 18 months pretending didn't exist. "Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I've missed you all so much. It's been a tough ride with some technical issues, but by God's grace, we're getting everything back on track. Thank you for sticking with me. Your support means everything. Before we begin, I want to say a little prayer over everyone watching, especially the women. To the women, may God strengthen you, comfort you, and fill your heart with peace and favor. To the men, may God guide you, bless your efforts, and give you wisdom in all you do. And may God's protection rest on every single one of you. Amen. If you're ready for today's story, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My USA and UK family, I see you. And please watch till the end, because tomorrow I'll be dropping another story you wouldn't want to miss. Now, let's get into the story. But if you think this is the scandal, you haven't heard what came before, and what this baby survived to get here. Even 18 doctors said it was impossible. So let me tell you the real story, not the billionaire headlines. The truth. It started in aisle 6 at Wegmans, and it ends with a man losing everything money can't buy. Camille Rowan didn't look like a woman who would ever walk into the Ritz-Carlton holding a billionaire's child. Back then, she was the girl people looked past, maid by day, grocery stocker by night, exhausted 24/7. She lived with her aunt in a narrow townhome in Anacostia and used a cracked iPhone 6 because every spare dollar went to her younger brother's community college tuition. She cleaned baseboards and changed linen in the Crestmont family estate in Cleveland Park, D.C., a mansion so large it had 4 staircases and a wine cellar she was never allowed to enter. Julian Crestmont? He wasn't someone she thought about. Not really. He was a billionaire on the cover of Forbes, a ghost behind frosted glass office doors, someone whose name came up only when staff whispered about who got fired for leaving streaks on the windows. Then one Friday night, everything shifted. Camille was halfway through her closing shift at Wegmans. Her back ached. Her uniform shirt stuck to her skin, and she still had to restock the gluten-free pasta aisle. She wheeled the cart into aisle 6, humming to herself, when she nearly ran over a man standing completely still in front of the shelves. "Sorry," she said, pulling the cart back with a quiet curse. "Didn't see you there." He turned around. At first, she didn't recognize him. He wasn't wearing a suit. No designer coat, no press swarm around him. He looked tired. Hoodie pulled low, eyes sunken, like sleep hadn't been a friend of his for weeks. "Do you work here?" he asked, voice low. "I'm wearing the apron," Camille said, then immediately regretted her tone. "Sorry, long night." He smiled, kind of, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. "I'm looking for gluten-free pasta. My assistant usually does the shopping." Camille raised an eyebrow. "Living dangerously tonight." "Huh? I guess." She grabbed a box off the shelf and handed it to him. Their fingers didn't touch, but the space between them crackled for a second longer than it should have. "You're Camille, right?" he asked. That made her pause. "Do I know you?" "No," he said quickly, "but I know my house staff. I'm Julian." She blinked. Julian Crestmont. The Julian Crestmont. She fought the urge to look down at her dusty shoes, her too-tight apron. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "here's your pasta, Mr. Crestmont." "Julian's fine." He didn't walk away. He just stood there for a beat, looking at her like she was more interesting than anything on his agenda. Then he left, and came back the next night. The second time he asked about her shift. The third time he brought her coffee. The fourth time, he waited until she clocked out and walked her to the metro station in silence. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't some fantasy. It was awkward, slow, confusing, and yet something about it felt dangerously natural. Camille told herself he was just being polite, that rich men didn't fall for girls who scrubbed their marble floors. But he kept showing up. One night, she finally asked, "What are you doing here?" "Thinking," he said. "You're a billionaire. Don't you have therapists and yachts for that?" "I don't like therapists," he said. "And I get seasick." She laughed, and the sound surprised them both. "If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter." 2 weeks later, he asked her to dinner. "I don't date clients," she said, arms crossed behind the Wegmans deli counter. "I'm not hiring you tonight," he replied. "I'm asking." She hesitated. Every voice in her head screamed, "Don't." She said no, then said no again. Then, one night, after finding flowers tucked behind her locker with a handwritten note, "Not just gluten-free pasta, you," she said yes. Dinner wasn't at some exclusive restaurant. He brought her to the guest house on the estate property, said he wanted to try cooking for once. It was a disaster. The pasta burned. The chicken was still frozen in the middle. Camille took over, laughing so hard she had to lean against the counter. "You're terrible at this," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "I told you," Julian muttered, shaking his head. "Seasick. Therapist. Resistant. Culinary challenged." By the time they sat down to eat, the mood had softened. The lighting was warm. His smile was real. And for the first time she looked at him not as a billionaire, but as a man. He asked about her brother, about her dreams, about the first book she ever loved. She told him everything. And when the night ended, he didn't try to kiss her. He just walked her to her car, held the door open, and said, "I'm going to regret it if I don't see you again." She didn't sleep that night, not because she was afraid, but because something had finally felt safe. It would be 3 more dates before she let him kiss her, 4 more before she let herself fall, and just under 7 months before the entire world would know that Camille Rowan, the maid from Anacostia, was about to marry Julian Crestmont. But what they didn't know was how much it would cost her, and how hard she'd have to fight to survive it. They kept it quiet at first, not because Camille wanted to hide, but because she had to. Being seen with Julian Crestmont wasn't just dating, it was a headline waiting to happen. And Camille? She wasn't built for tabloids. She was built for clocking in on time, for making sure her brother's tuition got paid, for folding hospital corners tighter than her own life. Julian, though, he didn't care about whispers. He started showing up at Wegmans with no security, just to linger by the bakery and talk about anything but stocks and strategy. Camille warned him, "People are going to notice." He smiled. Let them. One night he tried cooking for her again, insisting on a redo. Same guest house kitchen, same hopeful disaster. This time he set the table, dimmed the lights, and burned the chicken twice. Camille laughed so hard she had to sit down. It wasn't just the food, it was him, fumbling and real and completely stripped of billionaire polish. And when she looked up from the plate, he kissed her, soft, hesitant, like he was asking permission even as he gave it. She didn't pull away. For the first time in her life, Camille felt seen, not managed, not tolerated, chosen. They dated like teenagers after that. Movie nights on his estate lawn, late-night calls that lasted until her morning shift. But 7 months in, Julian didn't ask her to move in. He got down on one knee, right there in the guest house kitchen, same spot, same flickering stove light. She said yes. The backlash came fast. Julian's PR team went ballistic. His board called emergency meetings. His mother refused to speak to him. And when the news leaked, the tabloids had a field day. Billionaire marries maid. From cleaning toilets to wearing a ring worth $3 million. Gold digger or Cinderella. Camille saw it all, on magazines at checkout, on whispered TikToks, in side eyes from strangers. She asked him once, "Is it worth it?" He didn't hesitate. "I don't care what they say. I want you." And for a while that was enough. At first, marriage was everything Camille never thought she'd have. Sunday mornings in bed, coffee in the kitchen, quiet smiles across shared rooms. She launched a cleaning service, C+Co, with Julian's support. He covered her startup costs, bragged about her work ethic in interviews, even called her the smartest business mind I know at a gala once. They were building something, together. But slowly, quietly, the together started to disappear. Julian's calendar filled with investor meetings and press tours. He stopped coming home before midnight. Their conversations grew shorter, clipped. He answered questions with half smiles and, "We'll talk later." Later never came. Then came Marisol Hayes. She was everything Camille wasn't. Harvard-educated, media-trained, tall enough to wear power like a second skin. She was brought in to rebrand Julian's public image ahead of his rumored Senate run. At first, Camille didn't think twice. Then the phone started buzzing past midnight. Julian started locking his office door. Their dinners turned into excuses, their laughter into silence. Her best friend, Renee, pulled her aside one afternoon. "Cam, you see what's happening, all right?" Camille forced a smile. "She's his publicist, not his girlfriend." But doubt had already moved in, sleeping in the space where trust used to be. One night, she set the table for two. He never came home. No call. No text. She sat there alone, staring at her reflection in the silverware. That's when she realized something brutal. She was becoming a ghost in her own life. He still kissed her on the forehead, still told her he was just busy. But his eyes were somewhere else, always somewhere else. Camille started sleeping with the bedroom door cracked open, like she was waiting for something to return that had already left. She once felt chosen. Now she felt tolerated. And that kind of love? It doesn't go up in flames. It fades, quietly, painfully. The two pink lines stared back at her like they were daring her to hope. Camille sat on the bathroom floor, hand trembling, breath caught in her throat. After months of heartbreak, tears, and quiet prayers, after doctors told Julian he couldn't have children, here it was, life, inside her, a miracle. She smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't tell anyone, not Renee, not even her aunt. She wanted Julian to be the first to know. She imagined his face, shock, maybe tears. She imagined them sitting on the bed, planning baby names and nursery colors. Maybe this was the thing that would bring him back. So she ordered his favorite dinner from that little Thai place near DuPont Circle, boxed it up herself, and headed straight to his office downtown. No call, no warning. She wanted it to be perfect. The receptionist smiled tightly when she walked in. "Mr. Crestmont's in a meeting," she said. Camille just nodded. "He won't mind." She walked down the hall, past the glass-walled boardrooms, past the framed magazine covers of Julian on Fortune, Forbes, Time. She reached his door. It was cracked open. She heard a laugh. Hers, Marisol's. And then she saw them. Julian stood behind her, his hand on her waist, whispering something close to her ear. Marisol tilted her head, smiling. Camille didn't scream. She didn't drop the food. She just stood there, frozen. Julian looked up, saw her, and the color drained from his face, but not with guilt, with annoyance. "You should have called," he said flatly. "This is a professional setting." Camille stared at the man she married, the man who swore she was everything. Then she turned and walked out. 2 weeks later, she was in the ER cramping, dizzy, alone. Doctors said stress, dehydration, early complications. The nurse handed her an envelope, delivered by courier. Camille opened it with shaking hands. Divorce papers. No note. No explanation. Just cold ink and a signature from a man who once promised forever. Camille didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just went quiet. In the weeks after the ER, she emailed Julian 17 times. Short messages. Calm. Precise. She sent him her ultrasound, her medical records, her doctor's notes. Left voicemails at every hour of the day. No response. Until one finally came. From his assistant. "Mr. Crestmont is not entertaining personal correspondence at this time." That was it. Camille stared at the screen for a long time. Then she closed her laptop, unpacked a single suitcase, and left the penthouse. She moved back in with her Aunt Lydia in Anacostia, a narrow row house with loud pipes and a leaking kitchen faucet, but it was filled with warmth, with quiet, with survival. Camille took up temp jobs, folded laundry, cooked dinner for two, rubbed her belly at night, and whispered promises to the baby Julian didn't want to know. And then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Noah came into the world, 6 pounds, 10 fingers, his father's gray-blue eyes. Even the doctor had to pause. "I don't get it," he murmured, glancing at the chart. "Julian Crestmont. Wasn't he infertile?" Camille said softly. The doctor lowered his voice. "It happens, rarely. Spontaneous reversal. But still, this is a miracle." She didn't cry, not until she got home and held Noah against her chest, his breath steady, his skin warm. She had been erased, but she wasn't broken. She filed for a DNA test quietly, paid out of pocket, waited for weeks. The envelope came in the mail with no ceremony. She opened it in her aunt's kitchen. Julian Crestmont, 99.99% probability of paternity. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Camille held the folder in her hands for a long time, not out of anger, but because now, finally, she had the truth, and when the time came, she'd deliver it herself, face to face. The conference room at the Ritz-Carlton had gone dead silent. Julian hadn't blinked in 30 seconds. Marisol sat stiff beside him, saw her breath catching in her throat. She looked at the baby again, at Noah, then back at Camille. "You told me you were infertile," she whispered. "You told me there'd never be kids." Julian opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Camille didn't flinch. She reached into her worn leather bag, pulled out a manila folder, and slid it across the table. It stopped in front of Julian like a dropped verdict. Inside, DNA results. Clear. Irrefutable. Julian Crestmont. 99.99% probability of paternity. Marisol didn't wait for Julian to open it. She reached over, flipped it open herself. Read. Went pale. Her hands trembled as she folded the paper back in half, placed it carefully on the table, and sat in stillness for a long moment. Then, quietly, almost too quietly, she picked up her purse. "You lied to me," she said, looking straight at Julian. "You used me for an image, a campaign, a press tour, and you knew." Julian stood suddenly, voice cracking. "Marisol, wait. No." Her tone was steel. "You don't get to chase what you broke." She turned to Camille. "I don't know you, but I should have." Camille just nodded, said nothing, held Noah a little closer. Marisol walked out, no heels clicking, no dramatic exit, just a woman who realized she had been sold a fantasy with an expiration date. Julian stood there, still frozen, his world tilting. He looked down at the folder again, then at the baby, his baby, who stared back with his exact eyes. But Camille didn't look at him. She was staring out the window, rocking Noah slowly, like none of it surprised her. Because it didn't. She had already lived through the leaving. This was just everyone else catching up. Julian returned to the room alone. No Marisol, no excuses, just the sound of his own footsteps echoing off the marble floors. Camille didn't look up. Noah stirred softly in her arms, his tiny breath brushing against her collarbone. "I didn't know," Julian said, voice low. "Camille, I swear I didn't know." She looked at him then, not with anger, with clarity. "You didn't want to know." He flinched, because the truth had a weight to it now, something undeniable, living, breathing. "You erased me," she said. "You erased your son. You told the world I didn't matter. You signed divorce papers you didn't write, sent silence where a man should have stood. And while I was carrying your child, you were posing for campaign photo ops with another woman." Julian swallowed hard. "I made mistakes." Camille tilted her head. "No, Julian, you made choices." There was no yelling, no courtroom drama, just the devastating calm of a woman who had already survived the fire and was now walking through the ashes untouched. He stepped closer. "I want to be part of his life." She held Noah a little tighter. "Noah's not a project you get to fix. He's not an apology tour. I want to help. I didn't come here for help." Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. "I came here so you'd see the face of what you left behind." She stood, taller than she ever had in his eyes. "You don't get to rewrite this." Julian looked at his son, at the baby he never believed could exist, and said nothing. Because what could he say? Camille walked past him, baby on her chest, head high. Noah stirred awake, Say blinking slowly at the bright light beyond the glass doors. She whispered into his ear, soft as a prayer, "You're everything he never deserved." And then she left, without fanfare, without fear, just the quiet power of a woman reclaiming her story. The house was quiet again, not the kind of quiet that echoes loneliness, but the kind that wraps itself around peace. Camille sat on the worn couch in her aunt's living room, Noah curled up on her chest, fast asleep. His tiny fingers gripped her shirt, his breathing soft and even, like he trusted the world now, because he trusted her. She ran her fingers through his hair and let herself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in months. She looked around. No marble floors, no private chefs, no elevator that opened into a penthouse. Just peeling paint on the walls, saw the hum of a space heater and the scent of lavender laundry soap clinging to the blankets. And yet, she had never felt more powerful. Camille had once scrubbed the toilets in Julian Crestmont's mansion, cleaned around gold-plated faucets and threw away champagne bottles she couldn't pronounce. She used to think her worth came from proximity, how close she stood to power, to wealth, to someone else's spotlight. Now, she held the heir to that empire in her arms, and she didn't feel small. She felt whole. Not because of what she'd taken back, but because of what she had let go. The anger, the silence, the idea that she needed someone like Julian to make her visible. She didn't. She never did. Noah shifted in her arms, letting out a tiny sigh. She smiled, pressing a kiss to the crown of his head. "I've got you," she whispered. And she did. She had built a life from ash, rewritten a story that had once been ghostwritten by someone else. She didn't need headlines or pity. She had truth. She had peace. She had him. Camille stood slowly, careful not to wake her son, and walked to the window. The city lights flickered outside, buzzing like distant stars. She had been erased once, but this time she walked out of the room, seen, heard, and unforgettable. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If this one moved you, the next story will leave you even more intrigued. It's deeper, more intense, and full of unexpected turns. Tap the image on your screen now to continue the journey. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story like this again.